You are listening to Spiritual PTSD. I'm Damian Skinner, a recovering exorcist and Christian. The stories you are about to hear are all first-hand true life encounters I experienced as a child and later teen exorcist and miracle worker. As a tongue-talking, spirit-slaying, word and faith child minister, I personally performed well over 75 exorcisms before the age of 18. Many of these stories are horrific in nature, many hilarious, but all are embarrassing. This podcast is for adults only, as these stories are disturbing, and I do like to say the word fuck a lot. Hey, this is Damian, and thank you for listening to another episode of Spiritual PTSD. As I often do, I want to record a quick little bit before you jump into the episode. I record the episodes, and I tend to do it in a way that is pretty raw. I try not to be too prepared, and with everything that's been going on, this particular episode was intended to be kind of a transparency, be honest about how being in shelter in place and all the paranoia and all the things from PTSD and all that have been affecting me in the last several weeks and affecting everyone. And of course, as I finally sat down to record this, I'm sitting in a car at a park because I can't do it at home with all the kids and everything. Record the whole episode and then find out that I wasn't even recording through the microphone, but it did capture it. And so it sounds kind of crappy. I apologize for that. It kind of perfectly represents where I was at mentally when I was making it. But this episode, even though it has some technical issues, is particularly about what I am learning about PTSD of a religious kind, religious trauma in these sort of, historical events, how it adds multiple extra layers of complexity and things that need to be processed. So if you yourself are dealing with heightened sense of paranoia and fear from trauma, or someone that is, I think this would be a pretty good episode for you or for them. Hey, this is Damian Skinner with Spiritual PTSD, and I am recording. This is going to be my first recording in a little bit. As any person with a podcast should, or any kind of content, I had a surplus. I had stored up 5 to 6 episodes and for my weekly podcast. And when the whole coronavirus thing and the shutdown and the shelter, all that as it increased, week by week went by. And I was really doing all right the first week to 2 weeks. And then I really started having some major issues, which I'm going to talk about today. And long story short, I wound up using up all of my reserve. And then a week went by and I didn't post. And then another week went by and I didn't post. And I have been down that path so many times before that I know exactly what's going to happen. And it just ends up with you just not, posting or just dropping it and not continuing. And, I don't know how long this podcast is going to last anyway. I'm really, in a lot of ways, just using it as a journal to tell these specific stories. And hopefully I'm encouraging some people in the process. But the PTSD aspect of this has been a real bitch for me. I know everybody is having a hard time. I know that it could be so much worse. And I don't say this just trite, just to, as a disclaimer. It's important for people to understand that I'm talking about the way that I'm experiencing and processing a global pandemic. And there's a wide range of better and worse. And that's true for all of us. And so, it's a scary time for some. For some, it's just like nothing fucking's happening, which that is what's actually made it scary for me, is all the crazy bullshit. So I've been just having a really, really hard time, and I didn't record, and I apologize for that. But when I started this podcast, I really committed to myself that I was going to do this at least for a year. So I should have 50 to 52 episodes. I'm not sure why there's a range. There's 52 episodes, 52 weeks. And so I'm just going to keep going. And if some crazy shit happens again, the next whatever animal thing that we're gonna come up with, and I drop out for a while to cope with shit, then I'll come back until I hit 52 episodes at least. So anyway, for me, I think the way that I wanted to spend this time in this episode is kind of talking about the added dynamics when you're dealing with something from a PTSD standpoint, but from a religious trauma standpoint. So this is the way I explain it to my wife. And again, if you haven't heard in some other episodes, my wife was not raised Christian. She was not raised in any real religion. And when she was older, she pretty much, anytime she was, with her dad, she spent the majority of the weekend at their local like bar singing karaoke. Like, she grew up in a completely different world than I did. That's a big part of why I married her. And that's a big part of why I use her as a soundboard. She's the number one soundboard in my life, to try and kind of measure the insanity, right? And so, long story short on that, I was trying to explain to her that right now, everybody on this planet is experiencing heightened angst and anxiety and stress and fear and all these negative emotions. And depending on that person, depending on all of their ideology that they've collected, they make their tapestry of what they think is unique to them, and they don't realize that it's all just layers of ideology. Then they start processing all those negative emotions. And depending on any number of behavior, environmental conditions, they either wind up finding a way to process this stuff into a positive or into a negative. It remains a negative, or it goes even worse. And that's just a general way of looking at humanity. It's kind of philosophical approach of looking at things like this. Now, everybody's having to do that. Everybody's having to sit with themselves. People who are professionals at running from their inner dialogue are having to face their inner dialogue. Suicide rates have, I think, been up. I can't say that 100% sure, but I thought I heard that. I could be totally wrong. Um, you know, uh, and then, you have the people are like, well, there's a lot of positives, the environment, there's been less car wrecks and all this kind of stuff. And yes, we can do that game back and forth all day. And I don't mean game as a negative. I just mean we can always find positives. We can always find negatives. That's true in anything. So everybody's dealing and playing with that. Then you have people that have extensions on top of that. They either have little babies, or they have sick children, or they have elderly parents, or they have people with immune disorders, or, right? Then you keep adding on to that. Then you have people that work in essential jobs. And so now their whole family are worried that they're going to be out while doing their job and so, just naturally keep stacking that. You stack all the different, then you get the socio-economical issues. You get the people that are, working at Wendy's or working wherever, you get the bartenders. You think we've all already done this exercise. So my point is for people with PTSD, just like people who were type 1 diabetic, okay, those people didn't do anything to earn diabetes. Now, I've got, just like every American, I know a ton of people that are type 2 diabetes. I'm not saying you're a piece of shit. I'm not saying you're an asshole. I'm pre-diabetic right now. It's kind of an American pastime. What I'm saying is for me, if I do become diabetic, it's type 2 and I earned it. I made myself this way. People with type 1 diabetes, and I've grown up and have known several of these people, they were born this way, and it is sucky as hell. They have so many challenges, okay? That's kind of a good comparison to looking at people with PTSD, the trauma that has happened in their lives. Maybe it was a one-time thing, but typically it's a lifetime of trauma. It's trauma over an extended period of time, whether it's lifetime or not. And, those kind of people like me, I carry a whole other set of challenges that I have to process. So I already deal with a day-to-day natural sense that the world is going to end. I already have in my mind twisted that I have so much proof that everything's going to go to shit because everything always goes to shit anyway. And if you ask me why I think that, I can point to you to 20, 30 reasons of things that went to shit, right? So to me, that is proof that all things are going to go to shit. And I have this whole side of me, the level of paranoia that the average person diagnosed with PTSD, the level of paranoia that we have can be staggering. Staggering. We don't need a global pandemic to already be scared as shit. Now you got to understand, I'm about to be 45 in June. I'm a 44-year-old man with 3 kids. This is not the scared, like, snowflakey kind of scared. This isn't a suck it up, Bubba kind of scared, because a lot of my buddies that have PTSD are fighters, they're first response, they're military. They're not just not managing their manliness. This shit is a real sense, and it comes from deep within your spirit. It comes from your heart, and you feel that the world is fucked. You feel at your core, you feel that the world is fucked, and what you're doing is you're making the best of the good times, because any minute, all this shit's about to go wrong. Now, if we want to have a logical conversation about that, any of us can fight for or against that perspective. And most of us fall on one side or the other. Most of us tend to think, man, if something's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong, right? And then there's a lot of people that you get around, and I don't know, I've seen it be personality. There seems to be personality types that lend towards this more than others. There's a lot of factors, a lot of variables, but some people really do, I always say, seem to walk in between the raindrops. They don't even see the shit that I see. And my wife is one of those. And it's actually caused some marriage challenges. I don't want to say marriage issues, but some serious, not that we don't have issues, but marriage challenges, because I felt that she needs to almost like wake the fuck up and start seeing all of the potential danger around us. And it took me a while, in my arrogance and in my primal defense modes and all this stupid shit. It took me a while to figure out, you married her because she doesn't see these things. That was the whole fucking point. The whole point is that she doesn't have PTSD. The whole point is that she doesn't see all the predator looking fools standing around. The whole point is she doesn't think that if she leaves a window unlocked, somebody's going to come in and dismantle their family and tie us all up and all this crazy shit. This stuff it never even crosses her mind. That's why I married her, because she's light. She's always just on. She's just always beaming, unless there's some heavy shit being laid on her, which I have had the awesome privilege of managing through that, because a lot of guilt comes from that. And during this time, I've really had a hard time, and I've been home. I've been home with my wife. I've been home with my kids. Just like, anybody else that has a wife and kids. I understand it's been difficult for everybody. I know several people that are literally talking about divorce after spending this much time basically shut up with somebody. But it's not just spending time with somebody. It's spending time with somebody while there is this huge fucking fear that like half the population's about to die, right? And I don't care how logical you are. There are a lot of people that do know how to override their emotions, but subconsciously, and this isn't like new age mumbo jumbo subconsciously, I'm talking about the scientific subconscious. It's still there. It's still processing. It's in the news. And then if you get out and stores are closed and people are wearing fucking masks and shit, I don't care how logical you are. You're scared somewhere in your core, the human part of you, even if it's that primal lizard brain, the survival modes are kicking in. Now you're spending all this time with someone, and most of us have engaged our committed relationships from a standpoint of, it's a balance of how much time we actually spend together. And if you are spending every day together in a heightened emotional state, then yeah, you're going to start finding cracks. And the cracks have been me. They haven't been my wife. She's been amazing the whole time. But I've just started really cracking under not having time by myself, constantly being around noise. It's really difficult for me to meditate in the house when, kids are running around. We are in a small house already. Then we have the added dynamic of sharing custody with our two daughters. So when Taylor and I got married, I brought a daughter and she brought a daughter. And my relationship with my ex-wife, which I actually have talked about a lot and will continue, she's actually going to be on an episode on here. We're friends. Everything is, you'll hear that story another time. But we agree so much on everything. It's been effortless on that side. However, my wife's ex-husband is a particular personality type. I don't want to bash him. I certainly don't want to bash him publicly, but let's just say not everybody really believes in science and scientists. And I just have always had that mindset. If you have PhDs, I really don't think that means you're right. That's not what it's about. It means that if you're wrong, you're either doing it on purpose, so I can hold you accountable for it, or we certainly would have got it wrong. Right. And so anyway, I'll just leave it at that. So all these dynamics have been going on in PTSD for me, which is still a fairly new diagnosis. I'm still learning about it. And then you roll in another element, which is this, I haven't felt it since I was a kid, but there is this weird gnawing at the back of my mind, gnawing at my consciousness about the end times and the apocalypse and this stuff. And I'm being honest, I'm embarrassed to admit that. I really am embarrassed to admit, not because I think that there won't be an end times, not because I don't think that this could have been the big one. I mean, it's not like I'm saying the idea of the world ending from a pandemic is ridiculous. It's not. That's why it's scary as shit, right? I also have the creative blessing and cursing of having an immensely creative visual story mind. So, I don't need help. I don't need visuals. I'm good. I got it. And somebody can just say, COVID-19, and I immediately start seeing my kids dying in a hospital. And they call that day terrors. And I didn't know about that. I had no idea until Charlie and Arian, who they'll be on a podcast, these two therapists that I worked with that were one of the ones that diagnosed me with PTSD. They were explaining why I have that. And so, I go all day, every day, trying to keep my brain and my thoughts in a certain balance so that I don't tip over into the macabre and the dark, not from a fascination standpoint, but from a just being tormented with pictures. So right before spring break, I think it was 2 weeks before spring break, out of the middle of nowhere, Ronan, our 5-year-old, just got really sick, started throwing up violently, like really bad. And he was sitting on the toilet, and Taylor was in there holding him because he was so weak. And I went in there, and he was gray. He was like E.T. in the ditch gray, if you get that reference. Like, it was disturbing. I mean, he really, really had lost all color. And I've seen that with kids before. And you do the dad thing. You don't want him to see that you're scared, whatever. And we took him in and, made sure he wasn't getting dehydrated. And they just said he caught something real quick and it was gone, like the next day. So now, every time that I'm hearing stories about, kids dying from this stuff or whatever, that's this default image I have, is that gray, lifeless, limp body that I just saw right before this shit happened. That's an example of how it gets connected and caught in my mind and in my thinking. And so, that's what's been going on, and it's been really difficult. I know what I'm about to say. First of all, I know what I'm about to say is only going to be heard by a few people. I mean, realistically, even doing the podcast for a year, I mean, there's just not going to be many people that ever hear this. So I want to keep that balance. But I am about to say something that a lot of the people, I think, that will hear this will certainly have a problem with. And the truth of the matter is I have researched and I have spoken and I have done the responsible things to the point of researching around this particular kind of therapy that I finally felt that I needed to do it and it was time. And if I was ever going to do it, I needed to do it when I was really uh, uncontrollably scared at my core, like at the core of my being. Again, I don't mean like watching a horror movie scared. I don't mean like, oh, these guys are going to try and jump me kind of. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about deep in my spirit, like any minute people I know are going to start dying, kind of a fear. And so, long story short, I finally did a mushroom, like a PTSD mushroom ceremony, is the way I would explain it. And if anyone's interested and does hear this, and you want to know like my references and my research or whatever, I'm happy to go into it. Or I could do another whole episode. I have people I'm going to bring on here that are doing psilocybin research with PTSD, specifically military personnel PTSD, and the horrific suicide issues that we have with our soldiers, with our military. I'm sorry. So anyway, the point is I did a ceremony. The reason I call it a ceremony is because it has nothing to do with novelty, entertainment. It wasn't a concert experience. For the record, I have no problem with any of that. That's not my point. That's not a poo-poo or a judgment on that. I've always had the mindset that if it's natural, then it is up to the individual to do what they want with it, right? Especially if it comes to exploring your consciousness and seeking healing. And so I won't go into that whole aspect of it, but I did this ceremony. I took it very seriously. I prepared myself. I fasted. I meditated. Was in meditation before. I came with an expectation. I came and really asked that this experience would be kind and not be like insane, because I really don't need any more fear right now. But that I need whatever this thing can do for me, because I'm trying to not label anything, because of what I had been reading and what I had been studying is, it's a very much a scientific thing. Now, people want to add a spiritual aspect to it. If you want to add the shaman aspect, you want to add the ancient ceremony aspects, dude, whatever, man. It's all fucking cool. Like, I really think that stuff is cool. But for me, it's really more of a scientific repairing the brain, reconnecting some things approach. And I had it. I can't go into it at this point because it's not fair to some people, but I really had a very, very clear, poignant breakthrough. And I got to be honest, I'm not saying that I'm completely fine and I'm better and whatever, but I do feel more at peace, and I feel almost zero fear. We're at that point, just for those that listen to this, later, we're at that point in all this stuff. Today is May 2nd. 2020. And so yesterday in Texas, our governor opened up a little bit. So like theaters, restaurants with limited people. And I'm sitting in a park right now. That hissing or wave sound you're probably hearing are the trees, because I have my window down. I'm sitting in a park, and not a park like where kids play, but like soccer fields and all that. And it is just packed. So people have had enough. And this is that point where the fear is that there's going to be a second wave. And I'm out of control. I mean, my daughters have other families that are exposing them to other people. And during this, what's already happened, we've already had to go a week or more without seeing, one of our daughters, because their parent would be irresponsible, And so the idea of a second wave is frightening. There's a lot of scientific reasoning behind believing there'll be a second wave. And I will say, in closing, and I'm not being sarcastic. I know some people would say that I'm just being liberal. I don't consider myself liberal or conservative. I don't even play any of those kind of games at all. I have no patience for that shit. I will say The only thing that has, the thing that has scared me the most, and the thing that I think I will carry away from this that is the scariest, there's a lot of positives. There's a lot of good things. I really have loved having family time. It's been challenging for me from the sound and silence and the overstimulus aspect, but I have loved having my kids and my wife around and all these things. But the disturbing thing that's going to stick with me is just how many straight up fucking morons I live within throwing a rock. I mean, it is so disturbing to me that we live in a society that mocks science, scientific research, and the attempt for progress. And the fear of being manipulated has hit such a fever pitch now that we're at the point, holy shit, I've never thought about this. We're at a point where I've been before, so I can get really paranoid. And that paranoia doesn't just stay at a certain level. Let's say we're working on a scale of, 1 to 100. If it starts at like a 5, when I meet someone, it doesn't stay at a 5. It grows. It's aggressive. It's progressive. It's going to grow because everything that person does is now starting to really firm up in my mind what I was paranoid about this person. It starts becoming factual. And, that's something all humans do. But a lot of people with PTSD really deal with this, to where we start building cases in our mind. We start seeing things. It's all based on facts. And when we try to talk about the facts, it's so offensive to the people that they typically just get so blown away, and then it gets into an argument and all that. But what I have not connected is, I feel like, I'll be honest, what I feel like happened is our society was barely holding on to pretending like we give a shit. And we were barely holding on to this white Christian view of America, the World War II America that everybody likes to pretend exists. And it's been gone for a long time, a long, long time. And, I hold that era in such high regard for so many reasons. Just being a history buff that I am is enough of a reason, not to mention my grandfather served. I've worked on documentaries about these people. I've sat in the room and talked with them. We all think of the World War II vet when we think of that whole time period, and it's overwhelmingly amazing, the stories. That is not the America we live in. And pretending like that's the America we live in is absolutely fucking asinine. Because the reality is, we live in a time that is so polarized that nobody would ever get out of the fucking boat. No one's going to storm Normandy when we can't even agree on how to refer to a specific race. No one's going to storm and keep rolling out body after fucking body after fucking body when we can't even agree that maybe we should all stay home for a few weeks until we figure out what this fucking virus is. So let's just stop pretending, right? It's over. It's fucking over. And I am one of these people that believe that the whole America democracy thing was one of the greatest experiments of all time. It was an experiment. It is an experiment. And I believe we're seeing the decline of a great experiment. And the ideology that we are living in this country is that no one can tell me what the fuck to do. You can't tell me. And I live in the South, and God bless the South. God bless these people. There are so many good people down here, but there are fucking idiots. And guess what? There's fucking idiots in the North and in the East and in the West. But down here, they talk and they get in big groups and they are a little bit of a different style. And so it's a specific annoyance for me to live in a world where people wear Confederate flag face mask and guns on their hips. And then 2 days later, fuck you, I ain't wearing a mask, motherfucker. You can't tell me to wear a mask. Well, what changed? They fucking told me to wear a mask. You were wearing a mask 2 days ago. Fuck you. All right. That is the fear that I picked up from this. Now, don't get me wrong. I already knew And I really honestly believe that low registration, now listen to the way I say this. I'm trying to curve my sarcasm. That low level of vibration, that low level of consciousness, most people would agree that if your life is about hate and division and violence, that you are living on a lower vibrational level. Translate that into whatever religion you want. If it's Christian, you should be saying that that's their flesh, but you're evangelical, so you're fucked, because that's how most of you act anyway. So it's very confusing. But the point is that I have seen, and the world has seen, this level of people that I think were so traumatized by having a black president. I think Obama so traumatized the uneducated, racist, white demographic, right? I mean, there's racist, every race has racist, every race has uneducated populations. We all have horrible names for all of them. All I'm saying is, in the white group, when there was a black president, I think it traumatized them to the point where they can't even fucking think anymore. They can't even connect back to their humanity. It has nothing to do with morals, has nothing to do with ethics. It has nothing to do with Christianity. Are you kidding me? It has nothing to do with anything other than being right and enjoying being in control for a while because you felt like you were out of control and you had a black guy running the country. Now, I know these people I'm talking about. I'm not making this up. And some people just feel justified. Well, you shouldn't have put a black guy in there. But then they won't say that they're racist. If your life is based off of making decisions off of the color of someone's skin, I know you've never heard this. I know it. I know this is new information. But it's 2020, so I'm going to just roll this out real quick. If your decisions on whether to do business, whether to date, whether to be engaged, whether to have friends, whether to talk to someone, whether to vote for someone, whether to whatever is based off of the color of their skin, you're a fucking racist and you're ignorant. And this is an education issue. Now, there's very few people that would raise their hand and admit to that. But then you start getting the shades of racism, which is hilarious to me because that's all skin color is shades. And you start getting these where you say, well, it's not that I have a problem with them because they're black. I just don't want to deal with their culture. Okay, well, I agree. That's a choice. You shouldn't be forced to deal with anybody's culture. But when it comes to voting issues and things like that, we've already missed the boat. So I guess I just need to close because I'm on a rant at this point. And I apologize. I'll try to edit some of this out. This is why I haven't been recording. I'm having a hard time staying extremely coherent. I'm not like super coherent for long amounts of time. So it's been a struggle. And my mind jumps from thing to thing. And all of the things my mind's jumping to isn't this shit obvious? And the PTSD thing really has a way of making you feel crazy by itself. You don't need a reality TV dude running your country, always keeping us redlined, always keeping us in the press because that's how he learned how to build his empire. I'm not even saying that that was a wrong way to build his empire. I'm not even attacking that. I'm just saying our country is now run this way. And we stay in a high level of stress and fear and what the fuck's going to happen next. And some people enjoy that. People such as myself, I don't. In that environment, it becomes toxic to me mentally and emotionally. And I begin to stew on things. I become paranoid and I start feeling fear and I start seeing possible outcomes. I start building cases of very realistic possible outcomes. And at the end of the day, right now, a lot of that is happening because I'm having to process how grown fucking adults will protest sitting at home, losing some money. I understand the economic issue. I totally get it. I'm just saying, on the PTSD side, I have children. I have two parents with extremely poor health. My mom, congestive heart failure, double kidney failure. I'm not just being weak. It's scary to watch people that just don't give a shit, and to find out that there's so many of them, and they've been emboldened, and now they're vocal, and now they feel they have a defensible position to defend their rights to do whatever the hell they want to do. When that very thing could wind up, killing my kids or my parents or something like that. And so all of my friends that have been diagnosed with PTSD, all of my friends that aren't diagnosed, but they're kind of on the journey to finding out, this seems to be the main thing that's really freaking us out at night. It's not the numbers, it's not the curves, it's not even the president, it's not even that stuff gets old. It's the people that we're around that we hear their rationalization, and when you ask them what has changed, they can't really tell you what's changed. And so that just creates such another level of paranoia, distrust, fear, just this angst that, oh my God, the life and the outcome of my loved ones are in the hands of the lowest common fucking denominator. That's a scary, scary time to be in. And for me, meditating, dear God, anything and everything I can to keep myself from just going into a pit of self-reflection and thinking and analyzing. And, I'm just encouraging anybody that's really dealing with that. The best thing you can do is meditate, sleep. Don't overlook, and there is nothing wrong with using sleep as a way to manage this level of anxiety. If you're having test anxiety, that's not really what I'm talking about. Hopefully you know that by now. But right now it's just not the time, in my opinion. I said it on the last podcast, episode 10. Now's not the time to be trying to perfect yourself. I just don't think it is. If you're struggling with anxiety, depression, if you're struggling with, PTSD and the things that go with it, be kind to yourself. Move slow, move steady, realize that you're in a heightened state, and that everything you're looking at is actually a shadow of something. Everything you're looking at is all of your internal experiences being reflected on world events around you. You're loved. You're not alone. If somebody hears this and you're like, this guy gets it, holy shit, this guy gets it, DM me, reach out to me. All my information is online. You don't have to go through this stuff alone. I love you guys. Everybody stay strong. I'm believing we're not going to have a horrible second wave. And I'm going to keep recording. I'm going to get back on to my regular stories. And the next episodes are just going to be regular episodes.
Love this episode of Spiritual PTSD Podcast? Head over to iTunes, Spotify, or Google to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's really helpful this early on in our podcast journey. And of course, don't forget to check out our website, spiritualptsd.com, for full interviews, event updates, and to join the conversation. Thank you. The opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and their guest. All facts and information has been stated as the host and their guest experience them and should not serve as a historical portrayal.